All right, let's jump right into this fascinating explainer of a massive sociological experiment where 100 people were stranded out in the deep wilderness. You'd probably assume that if you throw a bunch of people into the woods, the rugged survivalists, the folks who can literally start a friction fire or build a shelter out of twigs, are completely guaranteed to be the last ones standing. But what happens when you pit hardcore wilderness pros against a group of absolute everyday amateurs? Well, as we're going to see, the results completely flip everything we thought we knew about human survival totally upside down.
To make sure everyone was highly motivated to stick it out, there was a massive incentive, $250,000. That staggering amount of cash is the prize pool that kept these contestants pushing through freezing temperatures, extreme hunger, and just awful sleep deprivation. Whichever team had the most people remaining when help finally arrived would split this life-changing sum of money.
I mean, it sounds totally counterintuitive, right? It really challenges our basic logic. Could a group of amateurs truly outlast seasoned survival experts in the wild? Your gut probably screams, absolutely not. But this experiment proves that what keeps us alive in a crisis isn't always what you'd expect. The true mechanics of human endurance are just so much more complex than knowing how to tie a good knot.
So part 1, the ultimate survival experiment.
Here's a brilliant setup. On one side, we have the blue team, made up of 50 seasoned survival experts. Honestly, some of these folks spend months in the woods just for fun. On the other side, the red team, 50 everyday amateurs. But to level the playing field a bit, the amateurs basically got a shopping spree right before drop-off. They could buy whatever they thought they needed. So one team is relying purely on hard wilderness skills, while the other literally bought their way in with store-bought gear like giant packs of bottled water, tarps, and lighters.
The experts on the blue team rolled in incredibly confident. Like, one of them actually said they packed for any climate because they thought they might be dropped in Alaska. They were completely mentally prepared for the harshest physical environments imaginable. But as we're about to see, while they were laser-focused on conquering the elements, they were totally unprepared for the human element.
Moving on to part 2, shelter, expertise versus gear.
The immediate irony here is just staggering. The blue team meticulously built this massive debris shelter with foot-thick leaf insulation. Textbook wilderness survival stuff. But building it took so much energy that they ended up sleeping on the freezing wet ground that first night. And the result? 2 experts tapped out immediately because their bodies just couldn't handle the cold. Meanwhile, the amateurs simply threw up their flimsy store-bought kids' tents and slept incredibly comfortably. Expertise literally lost the pros 2 members before the game even really got going.
But, gear only gets you so far. The wilderness absolutely did not care about their skills or their tents, and it quickly dialed up the misery with a brutal shift in the weather. By day 8, a massive storm blew in. We're talking 5 solid hours of heavy rain. The amateurs' campsite completely flooded, totally soaking their clothes and sleeping bags. The elements were actively trying to push everybody to their absolute breaking point. Mother Nature really is the ultimate equalizer.
Which brings us to part 3, the psychological food crisis.
Now physically, the experts clearly had the upper hand gathering calories. They're holding foraging classes, building river traps, finding hidden caches of root vegetables. The amateurs? Complete lack of discipline. They absolutely destroyed all their store-bought party mix and snacks by day 2, leaving themselves completely ravenous. But here's the catch. Managing those wild calories triggered an intense psychological breakdown for the experts. They had food, sure, but they just couldn't agree on how to share it.
Then, to really test their willpower, the creators threw in this brilliant psychological trap that completely changed the dynamic. Both teams are suddenly gifted 50 cans of food, but whichever team returns the most unopened cans after 72 hours wins a massive reward. And if there's a tie, neither team gets anything.
50. This number is basically the punchline to a very dark joke. In a shocking twist, both teams endured this agonizing, mind-numbing hunger. They literally buried the cans to keep from eating them, and after 3 days, they both returned exactly 50 unopened cans, a dead tie, meaning absolutely no reward for anyone. The sheer devastation of starving for 72 hours for absolutely nothing caused immediate, tearful tap-outs on both sides.
All right, part 4. Teamwork versus infighting.
When you gather 50 hardcore survivalists, you're usually dealing with 50 massive egos. Being naturally oppositionally defiant, which is exactly how one expert described himself, is a total recipe for absolute disaster when you're forced into communal living under extreme stress.
Despite having all the hard skills in the world, the experts began self-eliminating rapidly, simply because they couldn't stand living with each other. I mean, you had guys hoarding potatoes in sheds away from their own teammates. You had explosive screaming matches over how to wipe down cooking counters. 50 Type A personalities all trying to be the alpha. The mental energy they spent fighting each other drained them so much faster than the cold or the hunger ever did.
Conversely, look at the red team. Zero foraging skills, right? But they instituted this radical counter strategy. They set up a community pantry, designated chefs to cook whatever meager rations they had left, and built a culture of total radical sharing. And even when the food was terrible, and reportedly their cooking was just awful, they bonded over their shared misery. They proved that community, delegation, and emotional support can actually trump pure physical capability.
Let's hit part 5, surviving the elements.
One of the amateurs hit the nail right on the head about the experts when they said their hobby is suffering in the woods. And yeah, they realized the pros actively sought this stuff out. But there is a massive, massive difference between suffering on your own terms for a fun weekend and suffering while locked in a psychological war of attrition with 49 other stubborn know-it-alls for a share of $250,000.
By day 14, the paranoia was just off the charts. They were offered these temptation boxes. Press a button and you get life-saving items, fishing gear, cast iron pots, building supplies, even peanut butter cups. But the rule was, if you take it, the other team gets 0. If both pass, both get the items eventually. The paranoia was so intense that both teams actually rejected desperately needed supplies, just sitting there starving, to ensure they didn't accidentally give the opposing team an advantage. The game had completely broken their trust.
So when we break down the data from who tapped out and why, this stunning irony pops up about what actually dictates survival in a group. The experts' greatest weakness wasn't the weather at all. It was their own infighting and oversized egos. And the amateurs' greatest strength wasn't their store-bought tents, it was their emotional intelligence, their willingness to be vulnerable, and the fact that they genuinely actually liked one another.
The core takeaway of this entire explainer really boils down to this fascinating concept: sociological resilience. It's basically the ability of a group to withstand a massive crisis through a shared identity, emotional intelligence, and having each other's backs, rather than relying strictly on individual physical skills. A lone wolf expert might survive alone, for sure, but a pack of cooperative amateurs can survive together.
In a true long-term crisis, the soft skills of just getting along with your neighbor, like conflict resolution, sharing resources, keeping morale up, those might actually save your life long before your ability to start a friction fire or identify an edible root ever does. The amateurs survived because they built a community. The experts fractured because they were just a collection of competing individuals.
So it leaves us with this incredible final question that totally redefines how we think about human survival. If everything went sideways and you were stranded tomorrow, knowing what you know now about the true toxic cost of ego in a crisis, who would you rather be stuck with? A highly skilled, solitary expert or a deeply cooperative amateur? Really gives you something to think about the next time you decide what actually makes someone a survivor.